The snow fell in thick, silent sheets, softening the edges of the new world around her. Naomi Evans sat stiffly in the back seat of her parents' car, eyes pressed to the window as white flurries blurred the street signs. This neighborhood was nothing like the one they used to visit at Christmas. No kids playing in yards, no lights strung with chaos and joy. Just manicured hedges, symmetrical porches, and trimmed driveways leading to homes too perfect to feel lived in. Her mother turned in the passenger seat with a practiced cheerfulness. "It's just up ahead, wait until you see it." Naomi didn't answer. She nodded slightly, lips drawn into a polite smile. The car slowed, tires crunching over salted pavement, and then stopped in front of a tall, brick colonial with grand windows and a wreath too large for the door. A for sale sign had been recently pulled, leaving a square of pale grass exposed in the snow. The house looked expensive, but it didn't look like home. Inside, the air was warm but impersonal. Polished wood floors, white marble counter, and a Christmas tree that might have been arranged by a professional decorator. Naomi's footsteps echoed as she followed her parents down the hallway. The walls were bare, except for a few sterile prints landscapes in soft blues and grays. Her grandfather's voice called from the living room. "There she is. Come in, Naomi, look at this place." He stood beside the fireplace, beaming beneath his ivory sweater. Her grandmother, elegant as ever, offered a gentle wave from the kitchen archway. Naomi offered a soft hi, and stepped into the room like a guest in a stranger's house. "Do you like it?" her mother asked, resting a hand on her back. "It's a big change, but your grandparents wanted to be closer to the city. We're lucky to have found something this nice." "Yeah," Naomi murmured. "It's really something." She didn't mean it as a compliment, but no one noticed. As the evening went on, Naomi moved through the house like a shadow. The dining room gleamed with untouched silverware. Every surface was spotless, every decoration placed with sterile intention. No signs of history, no photos on the walls, no worn spots on the couches. She stood near the staircase later that night, gazing out the window. Snow blanketed the ground, hiding whatever used to be here. It felt wrong, like a secret covered in white. This wasn't just a new house, it was a blank page where a story had been erased. Something prickled at the edge of her thoughts, but she couldn't place it yet. Instead, she held her coat tighter around her shoulders and turned away from the window. Down the block, a porch light flicked on in the house across the street. A figure stepped out, an older woman in a heavy coat, locking eyes with Naomi across the silence. She gave a small nod before vanishing back inside. Naomi stared at the closed door, her pulse suddenly quickening. Tomorrow, she'd go for a walk, just to see what this place used to be. The morning was clear and cold, the kind of winter air that made every breath feel sharp and deliberate. Naomi zipped her coat to her chin and stepped outside, crunching across the icy walkway toward the street. The house behind her, her grandparents' new dream home, looked like a catalog image. Still, it felt more foreign now than it had the night before. She walked without direction, letting her boots trace narrow paths between glistening lawns and carbon copy porches. The neighborhood was too quiet. There were no kids, no music from open windows, no smell of frying bacon. Drifting through the air, just silence and symmetry. Naomi passed homes with small American flags, SUVs in pristine driveways, and welcome mats that said "gather" in cursive script. And yet, something clung to the air beneath the snow and stillness. At the far corner of the block, a cracked sidewalk disrupted the perfection. A narrow path led to a small brick house with chipped paint and a drooping roof, older than the others, standing stubbornly amid the newer builds like a memory that refused to fade. Its porch light was on, even in daylight. Naomi paused. Front door opened slowly. An older black woman stepped out in a knit shawl, her gray hair tucked beneath a dark wool hat. She looked directly at Naomi, then gestured gently with her hand. "You just visiting?" the woman asked as Naomi stepped closer. Naomi hesitated. "Yeah, my grandparents moved into the new place on Elm. I'm just walking." The woman nodded. "I figured, you've got that look." Naomi tilted her head. "What look?" "The look of someone realizing this neighborhood isn't what it seems." The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Gaines, a retired teacher who had lived in this house for nearly 50 years. Her eyes were tired, but sharp, filled with the kind of knowing that comes from decades of watching things disappear. "This whole block," she said, sweeping her hand across the horizon of new builds, "used to be filled with black families, churches, barbershops, a daycare my sister ran, all gone now." Naomi's stomach tightened. What happened? rezoning, redevelopment. They said it would improve the area. What they meant was they wanted us out. So they raised taxes, shut down community centers, bought land in bulk, then flipped it for a profit. She pointed to Naomi's grandparents' house. That lot belonged to the Jenkins family, 3 generations in that home. Lost it when the city claimed it was blighted, whatever that means to them. Funny how quickly it became luxury, real estate. Naomi looked back in the direction she came from, her heart thudding in her ears, the white paint, the granite counters, the emptiness. Suddenly it felt like the house itself was a grave marker. I didn't know, Naomi whispered. Most people don't, Mrs. Gaines said. But once you do, you've got to decide what you're going to do with it. They stood in silence for a moment, snowflakes falling like ash around them. Mrs. Gaines gave a sad smile. I see a lot of families move in, pretend they're pioneers, discovering something new. But this land wasn't empty, honey. They just acted like it was. Naomi's throat tightened. Thank you, she said quietly, turning to go. Really? She walked back more slowly than before, every step heavier. Her eyes scanned the houses, but now she saw more than manicured lawns and elegant shutters. She saw ghost stories buried beneath siding and silence. Back at her grandparents' house, she paused on the porch. Her fingers hovered over the doorknob. Inside, Christmas dinner was being prepared. The table would be set, laughter rehearsed. But the question echoing inside her mind was louder than ever. Whose house is this really? And would anyone inside even care to know? Tomorrow was Christmas, and Naomi already felt the storm coming. The house was filled with the smells of rosemary and roasted meat, the faint hum of holiday jazz echoing through the open concept kitchen. Naomi sat stiffly at the long oak table, the kind that extended with leaves when guests came over. Though no one extra had been invited this year, her grandmother moved gracefully between dishes, placing a platter of glazed carrots with the same ease as she folded linen napkins. Her mother laughed too loudly at her father's joke about traffic. Her younger brother poked at his phone beneath the table, thumbs twitching. It was all choreographed, every word, every smile, timed like a commercial. But Naomi couldn't shake the conversation from yesterday, the way Mrs. Gaines had looked at her. The weight of that nod, the story of the Jenkins family, and what once stood on this land. She stared at the turkey in front of her, perfectly browned, stuffed. Her grandfather, Arthur, stood with carving knife in hand, beaming with pride. All right, time to make it official, he said, raising his wine glass high. To family, to new beginnings, to the house. Her grandmother chimed in. Arthur chuckled, eyes crinkling at the corners as he turned to Naomi. And to you, sweetheart, he said warmly. Did you like the new house? The knife hovered over the turkey breast. Naomi's chest locked. Time slowed. Her fork stilled in midair. The scent of herbs turned to ash. She felt the silence bloom around her like smoke. She looked up at him, at the expectant eyes around the table. Her mother's smile faltered. Her father shifted in his seat. No one else noticed the chill that had suddenly entered the room. Naomi swallowed hard. I don't know yet. A beat of silence. Then a nervous laugh from her mother. Well, it's only been a day, she said quickly. She hasn't had a chance to settle in. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Nothing wrong with it, is there? Naomi shook her head once, too quickly. No, it's fine. The lie tasted bitter. Arthur nodded and began slicing into the turkey. The sound of the blade against bone made Naomi flinch. Plates were passed, conversation resumed, but Naomi barely heard any of it. Her eyes flicked from the crystal glasses to the porcelain plates, to the pristine walls where no memories had yet been made. Her mother leaned in and whispered, Not now, please. Naomi didn't answer. The fork remained untouched in her hand. Across the table, her grandfather laughed at something trivial, and Naomi watched the pieces fall neatly into place, like the turkey. Like history, carved and served without ever asking who paid for the meal. She lowered her gaze, quietly pulling her napkin into her lap. Tomorrow, she needed answers, and they wouldn't come from anyone at this table. Naomi didn't wait for dessert. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished floor like a scream. The chatter dulled, forks paused midair, but no one said her name. She walked out of the dining room with quiet fury, fists clenched, and breath tight, her heart pounding harder than her boots on the stairs. She reached the guest room, shut the door, and leaned against it. The silence inside wasn't peace, it was pressure. It roared in her ears, louder than any holiday cheer. She closed her eyes. A soft knock came moments later. Naomi? Her mother's voice, cautious. "Can I come in?" No answer. Diane pushed the door open, her expression stiff with the calm Naomi recognized as performance. Naomi stayed by the window, arms crossed. "You didn't have to leave like that," Diane said. "It's Christmas." Naomi turned, her voice low and tight. "And you didn't have to stay quiet." Her mother sighed, stepped farther in. "It's not the time for this." Naomi stared at her. "When is it ever?" Diane didn't respond. She gave a small shake of her head and backed toward the door. "We'll talk later." Naomi watched her go, but they wouldn't talk later. They never did. Not really. She dropped onto the edge of the bed and let the silence take her. But memory filled the quiet. She thought of the Christmas cards that never looked like her. The way relatives said her name with a pause. The offhand remarks, "Your curls are so wild," followed by hands in her hair without permission. The way people asked, "Where are you from originally?" with a smile that demanded explanation. The guidance counselor in 10th grade who suggested state school might be a better fit. The store clerk who followed her when she wore a hoodie. The family friend who laughed, "You're so articulate," like it was a miracle. Each moment had passed like a snowflake, small, brief, easy to dismiss, but now they piled inside her, heavy and cold, her entire life. She had been taught to blend in, to smile, to behave, to not make a scene. And she had tried. God, she had tried. Polite nods, swallowed anger, thank yous through clenched teeth. She'd been the perfect daughter in their perfect world. But yesterday, Mrs. Gaines gave her something she didn't expect, truth, and once it had been spoken, it couldn't be unsaid. The house wasn't just new. It was stolen, like so much else. Naomi opened her eyes. Snow fell outside, blanketing the street in false purity. Downstairs, laughter resumed. But up here, she felt something else take root. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was the beginning of refusal. She stood slowly and walked to her backpack, her laptop, her notepad, her phone. She laid them out on the desk like tools. If her family wouldn't give her answers, she'd find them herself. Because ignorance had a cost, and someone else had already paid it. She glanced at the clock. Tomorrow, the county building opened at 9. The next morning, Naomi left before the sun had fully risen. The streets were quiet, muffled by snow, and her boots left clean, deliberate tracks across the untouched sidewalk. Inside the county records building, fluorescent lights hummed above, flickering slightly as she walked through the entrance. The place smelled of paper and dust like time refusing to fade. A receptionist offered a clipboard with forms. Barely looking up, Naomi filled in her name and reason for visit. "Property research, parcel number?" the woman asked flatly. "Don't have one," Naomi replied, "but I have the address." The receptionist sighed but typed it in anyway. A few clicks later, a manila folder was handed to her with a tag, "Elmwood Redevelopment Tract #6." Naomi carried it to a table by the window and sat down. Heart pounding, the file was thicker than she expected. Old deeds, tax assessments, acquisition, letters. She flipped through documents, the dates moving backwards: 2021, 2017, 2012, until finally she found it. Jenkins. Leonard and Angela, owners of 342 Elm Street for over 35 years. She stared at the names, the signature at the bottom of the title deed written in careful cursive. Below it, a stamped notice of eminent domain seizure, dated 2015. Reason, public utility upgrade and safety compliance for urban revitalization project. Naomi blinked. She flipped to the next page. On offer from the city, just under market value. And a note, final warning: non-compliance will result in legal action and property forfeiture. A photo was clipped to the back, a modest home, white siding, green shutters, a tricycle left on the porch, lived in, loved. It was gone now, demolished to make room for clean symmetry and quiet money. Naomi's throat burned. She kept reading. The Jenkins family had appealed twice, denied, then vanished from the record. A sale to a private development firm came next. Berry's Holdings LLC, a shell corporation with no listed phone number, then construction permits, then a real estate transfer to her grandparents, just names on pages. Paperwork passed between hands, but each line screamed of something stolen. She closed the folder slowly, her hands trembling. This land had been taken, sanctioned by signatures, wrapped in legality, disguised as progress. The very ground her family now dined on had once belonged to a black family like hers, except they hadn't been adopted into whiteness. They hadn't been spared. Naomi stood and returned the file, barely hearing the receptionist's disinterested "have a good day." The door closed behind her with a soft hiss. Outside, the cold hit her like a slap. The world looked the same. People passed by with coffee cups and winter coats, oblivious. But Naomi saw it differently now. Every neat sidewalk, every lamppost, every condo was a monument to erasure. She pulled out her phone and typed into a search bar, Jenkins Family Plus, Elm Street displacement. One article. A brief local piece from 2016, family protests, eminent domain ruling in historic black neighborhood. Below the headline, a photo of a teenage boy holding a sign that read, "We built this, you bulldozed it." Naomi stared at the face. The name beneath it, Marcus Jenkins, age 17. Tomorrow, she would find him. The library cafe was nearly empty, the hum of espresso machines barely masking Naomi's nerves. She sat at a corner table, fingers wrapped around a lukewarm paper cup, eyes scanning the entrance every few seconds. She had sent the message that morning, simple, direct. "Hi Marcus, I read about what happened to your family. I think I'm living in the house that was yours. Please, if you're willing, I want to understand." She didn't expect an answer, but 15 minutes later, he replied, 1 p.m., main library caf. 1 hour. That's all I'll give you. Now. He walked through the door, tall, broad-shouldered, older now, mid-20s, with a cautious stride and eyes that didn't trust easily. He wore a black coat and scuffed boots. No smile, just a nod as he approached. "You Naomi?" She stood, heart thudding. "Yes, thank you for coming." They sat. A beat of silence passed before Marcus leaned forward, hands clasped tight on the table. "So, you found out?" Naomi nodded. "I did. The records, the seizure, the photo in the article. I had to know." Marcus exhaled. "We lived there for 36 years. My grandparents bought it when they first got married. My mom was born in that house. So was I." He paused, jaw tightening. "And then one day, it was just gone." Naomi said nothing. She didn't want to interrupt the weight of truth when it was finally being spoken. "They said the wiring was outdated, said we didn't comply with safety standards. But they ignored the repairs we'd already done, ignored the permits we filed. The city wanted the land. We couldn't fight the money. My mom tried to sue, lost everything." His eyes burned, voice steady but strained. "They gave us $92,000, not even close to market value. My parents split after that. We moved into a 2-bedroom in Eastview. I worked nights so my mom wouldn't drown in bills. She died 4 years ago. Stress killed her faster than anything else." Naomi's eyes blurred. "I'm so sorry." Marcus shook his head. "Don't say sorry. Just don't pretend it's all in the past." "I won't." He studied her then, gaze narrowing. "You white?" Naomi hesitated. "No, I'm black, but I was adopted when I was 3 into a white family." "Ah," he murmured. "So you grew up in the house of the people who benefit, even if they don't mean harm." Naomi swallowed. "I didn't know. But that doesn't excuse it." "No, it doesn't. But you're here, so maybe that means something." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the cafe wrapping around them. "I don't talk about it much," Marcus said, quieter now. "Most people think it's whining. Think if you're not homeless, you're fine. But they stole more than a house. They stole security, history, our damn rhythm." Naomi nodded slowly, "Like they erased you." He gave a bitter laugh. "Exactly. Like we were written in pencil, and someone just brushed the page." She looked at him then, not as a news headline or a faded record, but as a man carrying inherited loss. "Marcus," she asked gently, "do you have anything left from that house?" He reached into his coat and slid a small photo across the table. It was a boy on the porch steps, a hand-painted sign propped beside him. "This is still ours." Naomi stared at the image, her heart cracked, and for the first time, she didn't just want to understand, she wanted to help make it right. "Can I keep this?" she asked softly. He nodded. "You can start there." Naomi returned just after dusk, snow clinging to her coat, heart heavy with everything Marcus had told her. The photo he'd given her now sat in her back pocket, its paper edges soft from being handled too much already. She stepped inside quietly. Laughter spilled faintly from the living room, the glow of candles flickering across the hallway. The house smelled of cinnamon and comfort, so falsely untouched. She made her way into the sitting room. Her eyes drifted to the mantel. Above it hung a gilded mirror, its antique frame ornate, curling like golden vines around the edges. Beneath it, Photos were carefully arranged. Wedding portraits, vacation smiles, Naomi in a dress at age 7, standing beside her grandparents, all in matching pastels. She remembered that photo. Her hair had been forced into tight, painful braids, her grin wide but stiff. She had felt like a dull something arranged for display. She reached out and picked up a silver-framed photo of her mother as a child, standing in front of an old house Naomi didn't recognize. Looking for something, came a voice behind her. Naomi turned. Diane stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face tight. Naomi held the photo loosely. Was this your childhood home? Diane nodded slowly. It was. Before we moved to Ridgeview, Naomi looked back at the mantel. You've never talked about where this house came from, who lived there before. Diane stepped forward, tone cautious. Naomi, did you know? Naomi asked. Her voice didn't rise, but it struck like a stone in water. Did you know it belonged to the Jenkins family? That they were pushed out? Diane closed her eyes briefly. I knew the area had been part of a redevelopment project, but not the details. Naomi stared. You knew enough. Her mother's shoulders sagged. I didn't think it mattered. Your grandfather said it was all legal. Naomi's voice cracked. Legal doesn't mean right. Diane looked at her, eyes suddenly wet. I didn't want to make waves. We finally had something nice. Stability. After everything we went through to adopt you, I just wanted peace. Naomi stepped back. Peace at the cost of someone else's home, someone's legacy. A boy watched his family be erased, and we moved in like it was a fresh start. Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. Diane whispered, I didn't know how to explain it to you. Naomi shook her head slowly. You didn't explain it because you didn't want to face it. Her mother didn't answer. Naomi turned her eyes back to the mirror, catching her reflection half-shadowed, half-lit. A stranger in her own home. I thought this place was supposed to be mine too, she said softly. But now I see it's only ever been borrowed, dressed up, rewritten. She set the photo down carefully, then walked away, because some truths didn't fit in frames, and some mirrors only reflected what we chose not to see. Dinner was quieter this time. The lights were dimmed lower than usual, casting long shadows across the white tablecloth. Naomi sat at the far end, her plate untouched, posture rigid. Her parents exchanged cautious glances. Her grandmother passed the rolls without comment. The air was heavy, like everyone could sense something coming, but no one dared name it. Arthur Evans, Naomi's grandfather, sat at the head of the table. His glass of red wine caught the chandelier's glint. He cleared his throat and offered a genial smile, as though nothing had changed since Christmas Eve. I hope everyone enjoyed the ham, he said. No one answered. Naomi set her napkin down deliberately. Grandpa, she said, voice steady. Can I ask you something? He looked up, surprised, but still smiling. Of course, sweetheart. Did you know the house was taken from the Jenkins family? The smile faltered. I read the property records, Naomi continued. It was seized by eminent domain, sold under market value, then flipped to a developer before you bought it. Arthur shifted. We bought it fair and square, Naomi. Everything was above board. I have the paperwork. I'm not talking about paperwork, she said. I'm talking about people. He sighed, leaned back in his chair. It was part of a revitalization effort. The area was in decline. This was about making the neighborhood better. Better for who? Naomi asked. For people who could afford to forget what was already here. Arthur's tone sharpened. Look, I didn't make the rules. The city did. We simply bought the property when it became available. You didn't ask why it was suddenly available. He stared at her. Why would I? Naomi's chest tightened. That's the problem. No one asks. Because if you ask, you have to see it. Her father shifted uncomfortably. Diane stared at her plate. Arthur's voice dropped. Naomi, I understand you're upset, but this isn't your fight. You're part of this family. You live here. Naomi stood slowly. Her voice no longer wavered. No, I live in a house that belonged to someone else. A family was forced out so we could enjoy a view and a fireplace. Arthur looked at her like he was trying to recognize a language he didn't speak. This isn't about a bad investment, Naomi said. It's about stolen futures. It's about erasing lives under the label of progress. You didn't buy a house, Grandpa. She looked him in the eyes. You bought someone's stolen future. The room froze. Her words hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking. The clatter of forks stopped. The fire crackled in the silence. Arthur looked down at his hands. Her grandmother pressed her lips together, trembling slightly. Naomi took a breath, not out of exhaustion, but resolve. No one spoke, because deep down, they all knew. They hadn't just looked away, they'd chosen not to know. And now, Naomi had chosen differently. Asterisk, the chairs behind her still held the warmth of bodies, but Naomi no longer did. She stepped out, into the night, the door clicking shut behind her like the ceiling of a chapter. The porch light buzzed faintly above, casting her shadow long and thin against the snow-covered steps. She folded her arms tightly, not against the cold but against everything she was leaving behind. Inside they would resume dinner, or sit in silence, eyes fixed on plates they could no longer stomach. But Naomi was done being part of that quiet. The air was sharp, winter pressing into her lungs. Frost clung to the railing, to the eaves, to her lashes. She walked slowly down the steps, her boots crunching into the soft blanket of white that had erased all signs of the world that came before. At the end of the block, a soft light blinked on. The same porch. The same woman. Mrs. Gaines stood bundled in a thick coat and scarf, her breath curling visibly into the cold air. Naomi approached, and for a moment, neither said anything. Just two women, 2 generations apart, linked by something neither had asked for, but both now carried. She told you, didn't she? Mrs. Gaines asked softly. Naomi nodded. She did, in her own way. Mrs. Gaines tilted her head. And your grandfather? He looked away. Naomi said. Even when I put the truth right in front of him. The older woman gave a knowing sigh. They always do. It's easier to pretend history lives in books, not in deeds and drywall. Naomi looked up at the houses surrounding them. But it's everywhere. In the concrete, the carpet, the way no one asks who was here before. Mrs. Gaines placed a hand on her arm. So, what will you do with it? Naomi didn't hesitate. I'll write it. Mrs. Gaines smiled slowly. Good. Stories can dig things out of the ground that courts and money never will. That night, back in the guest room, Naomi opened her laptop. Fingers hovered above the keys. The title came first, The Cost of a House. Then the first sentence. Before my family celebrated its first Christmas in our new home, someone else lost everything. Outside, the wind picked up, but inside, Naomi's voice had finally found warmth. The community center wasn't large. Just a converted church basement with flickering overhead lights and mismatched folding chairs, but every seat was filled. Naomi stood near the front. A stack of printed articles on the folding table beside her piece, The Cost of a House, had circulated quietly but powerfully, online. In neighborhood listers, on front porches, passed hand to hand, like a truth someone had finally dared say aloud. She wore no microphone, just a simple scarf and steady breath. Marcus stood nearby, hands in his pockets, gazed fixed on the audience. His face was calm now, wary, but no longer closed off. All right, Naomi said, her voice rising above the soft hum of side conversations. Let's begin. Chairs creaked, conversations quieted. People leaned forward. Naomi scanned the room. There were former residents, church elders, a few activists, 2 journalists with recorders on their laps. Even Mrs. Gaines, wrapped in her shawl, sat in the front row. I want to thank you all for coming, Naomi began, and for being willing to see what others chose not to. What's been buried beneath new siding and polished floors. This isn't just about one house, it's about all the houses. The ones erased, the ones stolen, the ones some of us were born into, and others were pushed out of. She paused, letting her words sink in. Tonight isn't about blame, it's about voice, and memory, and claiming space that was never truly lost, just silenced. She turned to Marcus, nodded. He stepped forward. My name's Marcus Jenkins, he said. Some of you know my story. My family lived on Elm Street for almost 4 decades. Our house stood where a mailbox and hedge sit now. We were pushed out because someone decided our existence wasn't profitable enough. He glanced down at the floor, then back up. They didn't just take a building. They took our roots, our rhythm, like Naomi said, but we're still here. And we remember. A few heads nodded. Someone clapped quietly. Marcus stepped back, and Naomi took the front. Again, we've started a petition, she said, lifting the clipboard, to demand the city reopen an inquiry into those eminent domain cases. We're gathering stories, names, testimonies. She scanned the room once more. They thought this history could be demolished and paved over. But here we are standing. Applause filled the room now, building slowly into something real. People rose from their seats, moved toward the sign-up table. Toward each other. Naomi stepped aside and looked out the window. Across the street sat a house under construction, clean beams, a bright red dumpster in the driveway. But beside it, the old brick home remained. The house next door, still standing, weathered but defiant. She smiled faintly. No, she hadn't reconciled with her family. There had been no dramatic apology, no bouted resolution. Some distances, she'd learned, don't close overnight. But tonight, she wasn't alone. She had found something stronger than comfort. She had found community, voice, purpose, and from here, they would build forward, not over, but through.